Today we are going to make a chicken noodle soup with some honey butter muffins. So kind of like a take on like a honey cornbread, but in a muffin form, so slightly different texture, but not like a super sweet muffin, but it will be delicious. And let's start by making that up. I've got 1/4 cup of our butter melted here. So we're gonna add that into our bowl. And these again are just really simple muffins that just go great with like chili soups, stews, because they've got a little bit of sweetness, but they're not like crazy sweet. So we're gonna add in our 1/4 cup of melted butter, and then we're gonna use 1/4 cup of honey, which I'm going to kind of just eyeball what my 1/4 cup here. And it's hard to squeeze your honey out. That should be about 1/4 cup of honey. And we're gonna add in about, just around 1/2 cup of sugar, not too much. We've got the honey and then the sugar together to make the sweetness. So we want 1/2 cup of our sugar. We're gonna mix these two together before we add in our egg, and then we'll add in our milk. But we wanna just kind of cream the honey and the melted butter and the sugar together, because this is going to give us this great kind of nice sweetness to our muffins. Here we go. Perfect. And then I'm going to add in 1 egg. And then we'll pop that yolk, we'll mix it in, and then we'll add in our milk. But they're just kind of like a take on, similar to the flavors you get in a cornbread muffin, which is, you know, it's not a super sweet muffin, but it definitely has those sweet tones to it. So this is kind of gives you all those flavors and feels without the cornmeal. Okay, we've got our egg mixed in here now. Perfect. And now we're gonna add in 1 cup of whole milk. You want to make sure you're using whole milk because that's just going to give you the best texture on it. So I'm going to mix in my milk and kind of dilute my sugar and everything with it until it's all mixed up. And then we're going to add in 1 tablespoon of baking powder, 1/2 teaspoon of salt, and then we'll add in our flour. And we'll just gently mix it in. We don't want to over mix it. And then we'll be ready to start baking these guys up. Now, for our chicken noodle soup, I do have my chicken already cooking in my pot here because we're using 2 split chicken breasts and 4 chicken thighs with skin on, because I firmly believe, now sometimes I do make it if I'm rushed, but homemade chicken noodle soup, it's got to be made with some chicken thighs or you know, the chicken breast with the skin on, because that just makes the breast broth. But we are going to add in 1 whole tablespoon of baking powder. So the egg and the baking powder here is going to leaven up our muffins. Just making sure I've got, there we go. And then we're gonna add in 1/2 teaspoon of salt. Sent my little Viking flying. And then we're gonna mix these together, and then we'll be ready to add in our flour. But you don't wanna just dump everything in and mix, because there is butter in this batter. And if you over mix a butter-based batter, you're gonna get a stiffer end product. And I wanna have a nice, light and fluffy muffin. So we're gonna mix in our baking powder here. And I'm just gonna kind of cream it along the sides of my bowl. And then we'll be ready to add in our flour here in just a second. We're going to be using 2 cups of flour. There we go. I'm just making sure I get any of these big clumps out so that it doesn't like stay chunky, because I don't want that. I don't want clumps of baking powder in my end product. Now you could always take the step to sift the baking powder and the salt through the flour, but I just like to add it into my wet ingredients and make sure I get this part mixed well instead of to do that whole extra step, because it's just an extra step you don't need. Not sugar. So now we're going to add in 2 cups of all-purpose flour here. And we'll mix these in just until they're barely combined. And we'll scoop them into our our liners. We'll have our lovely muffins. Here we go. So 2 cups of all-purpose flour. We're gonna again mix these until they're just combined, which is like why I like to use a spoon or a spatula over using like a hand mixer, because it's really easy to over mix with the hand mixer. So I'm just kind of dunking all this flour down, and then we'll mix it up. Here we go. And again, just mix it until all that kind of white fluffiness is gone, but you're still gonna have a nice kind of lumpier batter. Here we go. And then I'm just make sure there's no pockets anywhere. So slide down some of this flour on the side. There. And we have again a nice kind of thick batter because this is a butter-based batter. So let's put our liners out. This makes about a dozen muffins. And I have my oven preheated to 400 degrees. So these are gonna bake for about 15 minutes at 400. Mix that last little bit in. And then I'm gonna grab a metal spoon because I find it is easier to scoop in my muffin mix with a nice metal spoon. So I'm gonna go through and then we're gonna add in a scoop in each one, and then I'll go and even them out as this. But you're gonna be able to fill them up almost to the top. It's gonna be a little bit shy. Here. And then we'll prep our veggies for our soup. And our chicken should be about ready to take out here in a little bit. Because I have it cooking in our broth. I just have it cooking in water right now, but we're gonna add some salt and some spices, and we'll use that base for our chicken noodle soup.
You have a question. Could you add chocolate chips to these muffins?
You could add chocolate chips to the muffin, but these, think of them more along the lines of a corn muffin. So chocolate chips, you would get a little, that honey flavor through, but these I feel like are just better plain with a little bit of honey butter. So just mix up some butter and honey and a little bit of powdered sugar together to make this nice little honey butter mixture. And you can put that in the spread inside the muffin for a little extra sweetness. They're not like a sweeter type of muffin that's similar to like a cupcake. These are gonna be closer to cornbread without the texture, but all that nice kind of sweet flavor there. Here we go. We're gonna add these, fill them all up, try to get them as evenly as possible. Scrape down, because again, we don't want any of it to go to waste. We'll even these guys out, and then we'll give them a good shake. Looks like my soup is about ready to turn down the heat a little bit. We have our chicken cooking there again. I have about 4 chicken thighs with the skin on, as well as 2 split chicken breasts with the skin on. And I find the reason why I like to use chicken and stuff with the skin on is because it has it makes the best broth, a nice velvety broth. Okay, let's pop these in the oven at 400. And again, these are gonna bake for about 15 minutes. And let's get our timer set. So 400 degrees for 15 minutes. Now let's prep our veggies up for our soup. We're gonna add a little bit of salt to our base of our broth and some pepper. And we'll prep our veggies. We're just gonna do a really basic chicken noodle soup. For our broth here, I'm gonna start off with like a teaspoon of salt in here. We're gonna add some chicken bouillon to it, so we'll get some more chicken flavor in it and a little bit of more saltiness, but I do like to start with a little bit of salt. And we're also gonna add in about a teaspoon of black pepper, or a half a teaspoon, not quite a teaspoon. And I'm just gonna give this a quick little dunk under here. Once I take my chicken out, this broth level will drop down to a much lower level on it. There we go. Beautiful. So just dipping it under to make sure that we have it all there ready. For our veggies today, we are gonna have our diced yellow onion. I have a really big one here because I love the onion flavor in the broth that it adds to this. Now, since we're doing like a chicken noodle soup, which is different than my like stews and stuff that I make, for this, since I'm using the really good, the chicken thighs and whatnot, I'm just gonna be adding our veggies to our broth afterwards versus sauteing them up like I do with a lot of my stews. And that's because our chicken noodle soup is more of a thinner broth-based soup versus a stew that has a richer broth. And I've just been kind of craving it because it's like all week I've had this little ache in my body. And my husband, we were all talking about it, how we're like, we're not sick, but we're just been achy all week. Maybe it's just letting us know fall is here. It's gotten cooler, but you know how it is in Tennessee at least. It will be like cold at night and then 80 degrees in the afternoon. It's very difficult to dress for here. But we've got our onions diced up. We'll put those in just a second. But we're gonna prep up all of our little veggies to kind of go in here. I've got a big group of kind of carrots here. We're gonna give them a nice peel and then we'll dice them up to throw them in here. I keep my chicken noodle soup pretty simple. Onions, carrots, celery, also add some green onions in and some leeks. So we get a lot of onion, different kind of flavors in here, but it makes for a wonderful light broth. And then I use I use these kind of noodles, so I don't use just like plain box noodles. I get these noodles from the freezer section, and they're almost as good as homemade noodles. And I have found that they are just wonderful in like chicken noodle soup or beef and noodle soup, where you don't have to do all the work to make your own noodles. They are pretty darn close. And they just taste like a wonderful homemade noodle. They don't get mushy or soggy, which happens if you use the dry box noodles. These ones keep their firmness to them, like a tender firmness, which is just lovely. Okay, we've got our carrots here. And I'm gonna turn up my soup just a smidge. We're gonna cut off the tops and the bottoms, and then we're gonna just give a smaller dice on it so it kind of cooks up fairly quick. I'll probably have the thicker ends of it.
You have a request to show the bag of noodles again?
Yes, so they're called reams. And I get them, in the freezer section right next to like the frozen pastas and tortellini dishes. They have them there, they're like tucked up there. And when I take them out, I'll show you what a noodle looks like. But they look like your classic homemade style noodles. Like there's times when I make homemade noodles, especially if I have leftover pasta dough. But these are ones where you don't have to waste all that time because they are pretty darn close to homemade noodles. And I will say this is everybody always, whenever anybody's sick or my parents are sick or when they have a friend that's sick, I always get requested to make this soup because it is so good. And part of it is I think it's because those noodles are just so much better than a box noodle because they don't get soggy. Okay, we've got some celery here. I've got about 6 or so little stalks here. I'm gonna cut off the tops and the bottoms because these were already pre-cut ones. If you buy the celery that has the nice leaves on it, keep your leaves. They add a lovely kind of, you know, a celery note, a more delicate one, but they are wonderful in soup, so you don't need to cut them off. I'm gonna just cut these all down the middle so that they're smaller pieces of celery, and then we'll give it a good dice up. Even if you don't like celery per se to eat, just leave your celery in really big, like just cut them in half and throw them in there to add the flavor to the broth, because it adds this wonderful note that really melds together, but it makes for a much nicer tasting stew. Even if you don't want to eat the part, you can always fish out the bigger chunks. There we go. Wonderful. So I've got, so far, my onions, my carrots, and my celery. Now we still have leeks, which I'll take care of, but leeks are kind of more of a dirty vegetable, so I'm gonna have to wash them really good here. But my chicken looks like it's nice and cooked. I can tell it's kind of split through, so we're gonna take it out and let it cool for a second. Whoop. Of course, my tongs did not hold it there. Let's get this one out, hopefully I don't throw it across the room. And then what we're gonna do to allow these chicken to cool down much faster is you want to pull the skin off right away. That is going to allow the chicken to get cool down and be able to be shredded before in like no time. Versus if you leave this skin on, it is like a little insulator and it keeps your chicken really hot for a long time. So I just take my tongs and I'm gonna pull it, separate it off, because we're not gonna be putting the skin in our soup, but taking it off will allow it to be able to be shredded, like I would say almost 20 minutes faster than they would. They cool down much quicker. Just get all of this off. So again, we have 4 chicken thighs and then 2 split chicken breasts. Now I'm probably not gonna use all of this chicken in here, but I had it, and so I was like, we'll just cook it up and then I can save some shredded chicken for a dish another day as well. Okay, now that we have our skin off, I'm gonna go wash my hands real quick. And then we're gonna put in our veggies here to start cooking up. So let's add in our onions. And our carrots and our celery. And then we're gonna add in a nice scoop of chicken bouillon to add even more chicken flavor to the broth. But you're gonna have this nice texture from using the meat with the skin on. But I do like to add a little bit more to give a little more flavor. Let me grab a nice big spoon. And we're gonna add a good sized scoop here, about a tablespoon. This is gonna add the saltiness to our soup as well as just some more flavor. Here, mix it around. Beautiful. Okay, let's get our leeks. We're gonna have to give these a good wash because leeks are, even if they look clean on the outside, they've got these layers just like an onion, but I swear they're like grown in sand, because when I cut them open, you always find so much sand and dirt inside them. And so you want to make sure you give them a good scrub, because you can just see right there, just tucked inside these leaves as they grow, you've got this dirt, and you don't want that in your product. So what we do is I always kind of cut them down lengthwise through the middle, and then we're gonna slice them up, and then we're gonna give them a really good rinse in the sink. These are going to add this lovely flavor to our soup. I will say, it has a nice onion flavor, but it's more delicate.
You have a question? Did you find any good sales today at the supermarket?
I did. We definitely, as hints, we're having leeks in there, but I have restocked up, and I always love it. You know, there's certain days of the week they have better sales than other ones. And I find like if I go on Friday tends to always have some good sales as well as Wednesdays. You know, I feel like every grocery store probably has their certain day where everything kind of goes on sale, but I am fully stocked on there. I probably should have done a video of all of my groceries. My husband always is like, oh, how much? Because I fill up the back of my car with so much groceries. It's always insane. And then at the end of the week, I'm like, where's my food? Where did it all go? So yes, I picked up, I've got chuck roast. They had chicken breasts on sale, so of course I had to get 2 big family packs. They had some chicken wings on sale. I got ground lamb, ground pork, ground beef, salmon. So my husband's gonna be really excited about that because we're probably having salmon for dinner tonight. But we'll see. Let's see, we're gonna give this a good rinse here through it. And then I think for our vegetables this week, I pretty much just got my staples that I always have. And then lots of fruit. Lots and lots of fruit. Okay, let's give this a good wash. Just kind of run it through. I always make sure, try to separate it so I don't have any pieces that kind of are stuck there.
Yeah, question, where did you get that strainer?
This one is, I originally got it a long time ago at this weird little store in Iowa, but I have found it. I have it on my Amazon storefront in there. They don't make the green one anymore, but they have this blue one. I have the blue one that also pops over my sink, which is bigger, but I do have it in my storefront. It is the best strainer ever because you can pop it down. It's better than those, you know, I feel like growing up, everybody had like this big plastic colander or this big metal one. These, I think, are wonderful because they're really easy to pop up and down and to clean. Okay, I'm going to give my broth a little taste here, see if we need to add any more salt or flavor. Spices, really. I keep my broth very simple and I don't add a lot to it, just pepper and salt and bouillon.
And will this recipe be posted?
We will definitely upload our video to the link on our page so you can always watch and recreate this. I do believe for my members, I made a chicken noodle soup recipe card back in the spring because this is one of our biggest hits here. So I do believe I have that for my members, but I do have also a couple of videos because I think I've made this 2 or 3 times this year already. So you can always dig through it as well. But it's the same pretty much every single time. Okay, we're gonna add in our noodles now. These take, you know, a little bit to cook up, so I always find we'll add it in for the last kind of like 10 minutes of cooking. And I'm not necessarily, since I have a smaller batch, I'm only gonna use about half my bag because they do get a little bit bigger in size. So you don't wanna have too many of them in there where they suck up all the broth. Let's see, I'm gonna give it a good stir. You know what? I think we can pour it all in. I think I have enough in here for it. There we go. Yeah, I have plenty of broth in here. Sometimes I make it where I have a smaller amount of broth and then I put too many in and it's more like chicken noodle pasta. Okay, we're gonna bring this, once this comes back to a boil, we will add in our leeks. But until then, I'm gonna just set them over here to the side. And before I start shredding the chicken, I'm gonna prep up my green onions, which we're gonna toss into the soup at the very end to add another layer of kind of a fresh onion flavor to it, which I find is just, it makes the soup really nice because, and you know, they always say onions are really healthy for you. So it just gives a fresh note to the chicken noodle soup and brightens it up.
Yo has a question for you.
What's for dinner tonight? I'm not 100% sure, but I have some ideas. Salmon might be one of them, but I might do, I'm not sure yet, but that's a high probability because whenever I buy my fish, I always like to use that as like the protein that I like to use quicker, but I'm not 100% sure yet. We'll see. Okay, let me get this chopped up. We'll check on our honey butter muffins here in just a second because they're going to be done in probably a minute or 2. So we're going to add this here and we're going to get ready to shred our chicken for this. Okay, let me give this turned down. I'm going to get my ladle here so we can, yes. it's better than a spoon. And we'll check it. You know what? It says 3 seconds left, so let me give this a good stir. I'm gonna turn it down, and then we will head over and grab our honey butter muffins out. And then we'll be just doing our final little end pieces. Okay. Let me turn this guy off. Look at these gorgeous muffins. These are our honey butter muffins. I'm gonna just give them a tap. Yep, nice and firm on the top. You always wanna make sure that they have a firm top so that they don't like sink down when you take them out. And I will say most of the time I'm pretty good about being accurate exactly how long they cook, but sometimes they need a minute or two more. I always aim to cook on the underside versus the over because you can always cook it a little bit longer, but you can't take it back. These are our delicious honey butter muffins. So we used a whole 4th cup of honey in here, as well as a 4th cup of butter, milk, egg, flour, sugar, salt. Really simple, but delicious. They're gonna give you kind of like the vibes of a corn muffin without that grit and that texture, but along that same of that sweet, but not overly sweet to it. Okay, let's get our soup going. We've got this up to a boil here, so I'm gonna throw in my leeks so they can add this nice flavor to our broth. And leeks got a little tickle here. Leeks cook up pretty quickly, so they don't need a whole lot. And by the time we have our chicken kind of shredded here for our soup, they should be nice and cooked through. There we go. I'm gonna grab my little spoon rest so I can put my ladle on it. And before we add it in there, but again, I want to taste my broth, make sure I don't need to add anything. I feel like I tasted it, but I don't remember. Perfect. Doesn't need any more salt or whatnot. Okay. Let's start with our chicken here. I'm gonna grab some forks and try to shred it off as best I can. It should be nice and cool for it. I'm gonna start, I've got my chicken thighs here. There we go. And then we'll give it kind of a little chop here, but they should be pretty cool. I said cooler to touch because we pulled that skin off. There we go. And I'm not going to use all of it, so I'm only going to shred part of it, and then I'll shred the other ones when they're a lot cooler for it, but I can definitely get part of these off. Here we go. And my dogs will be happy because I always will give them each a little bit of a chicken skin and shred it up and mix it with their food because they love it. A little treat for them, so they can be a little happy as well. Okay, so we're gonna do 2 thighs in here. Now, again, I always say when you're gonna make a homemade broth, using chicken thighs, or at least the breast with the skin on, is going to give you the best broth because it has that skin, has that nice fat content into it. And as you cook it off, some of that fat's gonna go into your broth. It's gonna give it more flavor, more texture. Okay, we've got those 2 right here, and then I'm gonna do one of my chicken breasts here. And we're gonna just pull it off, and then I will shred it up more, but I'm gonna take it off in chunks because it's a little bit hot, but not super hot. And I will say, it's a little bit hot, but everyone always tells me that my hands can touch lava, so I'm sure this is probably really hot for some people. Here we go. Okay. Let me pull the rest of this off, and then I'm just gonna rip it apart, and then we'll throw it into our soup in there. Now, this is always nice. So whenever I do make chicken noodle soup, I typically cook more meat than I'm gonna use because adding the extra chicken in there is going to give the broth a better flavor, and then I have extra shredded chicken to use in another meal like chicken pot pie or like taquitos or flautas, something that I can use shredded chicken in. And it's just kind of a great way to kind of do a little meal prep for another meal day, but also get the extra flavor from the broth. Okay, I've got those two. We'll save up, but you can see that's a good amount of meat for just, you know, one big chicken breast and 2 thighs. So I'm gonna just shred these up because again, you don't wanna have super huge pieces. And then we're gonna pop them in and we'll be just about ready to serve up. So pretty quick way to do it. Now I did, before we started the stream, I had the the chicken cooking for about, I wanna say like 20 minutes over, you know, medium heat. And again, I had, you know, 2 big split breasts and 4 thighs in there. But I just did that because it's kind of boring, and nothing special on that part. Okay. Make sure, little piece of cartilage, so I want to make sure I pull that out. And these are looking good, so I'm going to actually pop them into our soup, and then we'll mix it all around. Again, there's that tickle, just keeps coming back. So here is our chicken. We have both our breast meat as well as our thighs. And I'm gonna save my other ones. I'll shred that up later. Let me give my hands a quick rinse. And then we'll mix it in. And then we'll throw in our green onions. And we'll be ready to serve up a super simple but delicious lunch today, which I think is gonna hit the spot just perfectly. So let's add in. Beautiful, and you can see our leeks have this nice vibrant green color, which means they're gonna be tender when we eat them, but they haven't gone mushy yet. When they start to turn a greenish brown, that's when they get a little bit soggier. So I always like to add them towards the end instead of throwing them all in with the onions and the carrots and the celery, because they can't handle quite as much heat. There we go. And let's toss in our green onions now. Now, if you didn't want to add another layer of onions, you could also throw in some parsley, a nice little fresh herb that adds some great flavor, or some scallions or chives, which are a little bit more delicate in flavor. But I do like the really fresh note of it. I think it just really brightens it up. Beautiful. Okay. Let's grab our plate and a bowl, and we're gonna get ready to serve up because our soup is ready. Okay. I'll put this, guys, not too hot now. And get ready to serve up. Let me grab a plate. I'll grab my little cauldron. And then we're gonna grab some butter, because the way I like to serve up our muffins is with a little butter and a drizzle of honey. Okay. Turn this guy off. And we've got our beautiful chicken noodle soup here. Let's see, well, there's my honey. I've got my ladle, and we're good. Okay, guys, for lunch today, we have our homemade chicken noodle soup. We cooked up 2 chicken breasts with skin on, as well as 4 chicken thighs. Then we removed them. We added in celery, carrots, onions, leeks, and some green onions to it, as well as a scoop of chicken bouillon, and then our frozen Reams noodles. And to have on the side, we have our delicious honey butter muffin. So I'm gonna peel this off, and then we're gonna add a nice dollop of butter and honey to it to add just a lovely bit of sweetness and deliciousness. And these again are very mildly sweet but wonderful. And then a nice little drizzle of honey on it for a super simple but delicious lunch made in no time. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us here. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I try to do live cooking shows every single day, kind of show you what we're making for our family and hopefully teach you guys something along the way. Again, we do upload all of our videos to the link on our page, so if you ever want to recreate any of these recipes at home, you can just go to that link, search for what we made, and you can watch and cook along with me again. We also have a link to our Amazon storefront that has all of our different cooking gear and gadgets in it. I've got my Dutch ovens, my cutting boards, my knives. I've got my little pop-up squish down colander little thing strainer in there as well. But again, thank you so much for joining us. Don't forget to like and subscribe.